Thanks for everyone for coming. My name is Joel Gabri. I'm from Peace Direct, and I'm going to be sharing some of Peace Direct's work supporting locally led early warning and early response. I'll be talking you through one project in particular, how it operated, Peace Direct's role in it, and the lessons that we can take from it. For those of you who don't already know Peace Direct, a very quick introduction. We're based in the UK and US, and we partner with peacebuilders in conflict-affected contexts to support the work that they're doing. Our model is not one of finding partners to implement our projects, but providing the support peacebuilders need to implement theirs. More broadly, we advocate for a change in the international peacebuilding sector to remove barriers to local leadership and create an enabling environment for locally led peacebuilding. Over the past 10 years, Peace Direct has supported a variety of early warning, early response projects at different scales, from nationwide EWER systems that lasted many years down to smaller, more localized networks. All these projects are locally led and designed and run by the partner organization, with Peace Direct providing support where needed. This could be fundraising, connecting experience with other projects, or providing specific technical support. For this talk, I'll be looking at an example of a nationwide EWER project that ran for about 5 years from the mid-2010s. And because of the sensitivity of some of the work, I'm afraid I won't be able to name the project or the country, and I'll need to be a little bit vague about some of the numbers and dates, and I'll explain more about why later on, but I hope there'll be enough in this talk that you will find useful. And that being said, if there's anything that you'd like to ask that I'm not able to answer here, please do get in touch by email. I'll share it in my email in the chat now. And it'll also be at the slides at the end, so feel free to reach out. There you go. Okay, so some background on the project. It was a network of local peacebuilding and human rights and development organizations that formed in the early 2010s in response to a deteriorating political situation in the country in question. The group felt there was a need for a network to provide coordination and mutual support for the members. And they also saw that there was a lack of reliable information available on what was happening around the country, and that this could be beneficial not just to the members of the network, but wider civil society and international actors. As the network was quite diverse in terms of organizations and where they operated, they had members basically from every part of the country. They saw themselves as being well placed to perform this early warning function. In terms of Peace Direct's role, we were involved at the very beginning of the network. We were a part of the initial meetings where the network was conceived. We supported with the fundraising and provided some technical support in terms of setting up the project at the start. And we continue to provide that support throughout the duration of the project. So how did it operate? Well, we can break that down into kind of two functions. There was the reporting or the data collection side, and then the response. In terms of the reporting, key to the project was a network of community monitors. These were people based throughout the country and tasked with reporting incidents as they occurred. Now, for the most part, these monitors were volunteers, and they received no compensation for their role beyond covering some limited expenses like phone credit and things like that. And they were often peacebuilders themselves or human rights activists associated with the member organizations of the network. All the monitors lived in the localities from which they were reporting, so they had a kind of high level of an existing high level of trust and respect within their communities, which gave them kind of access to what was happening. To ease the coordination of this network of monitors, and there were hundreds of these monitors active at any one time, were a set of regional coordinators, and their role was to maintain the network of monitors within an area or region and serve as a link between them and the central office. The central office then was responsible for collating and managing the data produced by the monitors, and in collaboration with the regional coordinators, they produced all the analysis and reporting and ensured the accuracy, veracity of the data, and responsible for the general kind of administration side of the project. In terms of how the response side worked, I mentioned already that the membership of the network was made up of established peacebuilding, human rights and development initiatives. And then also many of the monitors themselves were also peacebuilders or human rights activists. So this put them in the position of being able to act quickly in response to events. They were able to see a situation develop and intervene before it escalated. At the same time, the central office were able to regularly review the data that they were receiving and produce analysis, which was then fed back to the wider network to kind of guide more coordinated or long-term preventative interventions. What you're looking at now is kind of a big overview of the project process, from a monitor hearing about an incident right through to some action being taken. I realized we're a little bit behind time with the delays at the start, so I'll just kind of quickly run through this, but I think this is being recorded so you can kind of read the text on the screen at your own time. But essentially, a monitor would hear about an incident, report it in using the technology that they kind of had to hand. It would then go through a verification and processing process, which involved kind of making sure that the report was authentic, it didn't have any missing details, that kind of thing. And then it was passed on to the wider network for some kind of response. So in terms of how the data was used, we can kind of break this up again into early warning and early response activities. One of the early aims of the project was to provide the international community with, I just seen a message that I can go over a little bit over, so I won't skip ahead. So one of the early aims of the project was to provide the international community with regular, reliable and trusted reports of what was happening across the country. The development of the network coincided with restrictions on both local and international media and civil society, and it became incredibly difficult to get an accurate picture of what was happening beyond kind of the capital or the region around the capital. So the network sought to fill this gap by using the data provided by monitors to provide regular reports on incidents and trends from across the country. These reports took a number of forms. There were short reports, which gave like a summary of key events over the past few days. And there were longer reports detailing incidents from the previous week, alongside kind of contextual analysis and recommendations for key stakeholders. And there were also occasional special reports, which looked at a particular issue affecting the country, like an election or something like that. And these reports were then distributed out to we had a kind of closed distribution list of stakeholders and key stakeholders, which received these reports on a daily or weekly basis. Later on, we responded to a request from international actors to have access to the individual incident reports. And we were able to make, to put in place a secured interactive online platform where authorized users could get access to a subset of that data. This system allowed users to explore the data, filter it by date and category, location, things like that, and also view past reports and analysis that the network had put together. And then internally, the network was able to use this data to inform its own activities, kind of identifying trends and commonalities across location to target their interventions more effectively. On the response side, I've already spoken a bit about how the members of the network and the community monitors themselves were involved in peace building and human rights activism already. So they had that, so they were already known and respected within the community, which allowed them to take rapid kind of ad hoc actions as opportunities presented themselves. Over the course of the project, hundreds of initiatives were implemented, from community mediation through to negotiating the release of those wrongly imprisoned, through to assisting in access to justice. Being part of a network here was really important because it enabled those responding to an incident to draw on resources that might not otherwise be available. So, for example, a community monitor could reach out to the wider network for the contact of a local official who might be in a position to resolve a particular issue. And this ability to lean on the wider network really made a difference in their ability to respond quickly and prevent incidents escalating. So the initial focus of the network was on rapid response to incidents as they occurred. And over time, the ambition of the network grew and began undertaking more preventative, long-term peace-building work aimed at building social cohesion or strengthening civil society. This involved the network developing proposals to which its member organisations could apply to be part of, and then inviting members to do the same, proposing initiatives that they sought collaboration on. Activities implemented here included things like creating local committees, which brought together police, administration, and justice and civil society, as well as spaces for communities to organise peace-building activities themselves according to their local priorities. So in terms of the impact of the project, community monitors reported more than 10,000 incidents of violence and human rights abuses and political unrest over the course of around 5 or 6 years, which created a really unique database of events that occurred over the period, with lots of detailed information, kind of the number of victims, perpetrators, things like that. More than 1,000 peace initiatives were undertaken, including kind of the rapid response activities, as well as kind of community cohesion initiatives. We also saw hundreds of local monitors benefiting from training on early warning and rapid response. And we know that the reporting was used extensively by governments, international organisations and NGOs to inform their thinking and activity in the country. So the project was not without significant challenges. The first of those was the context in which the project operated. So the government and the authorities were hostile to civil society across the board, and they were particularly unwelcoming of projects that sought to document the conflict. This was somewhat mitigated by the network keeping good relations at a local level, so with local authorities or the police, and by trying to maintain a level of neutrality in the reporting. For example, making sure to highlight incidents committed by all sides of the conflict. But despite these efforts, security was a constant concern. Individual members of the network faced both arrest and physical attack, and the network had to walk a tightrope of operating openly enough to be able to function as an early warning network, but not so overtly that it was seen as a threat to parties in the conflict. which had real impacts on how ambitious and effective the work could be. It kind of really put a limit on what type of work they could undertake. And then there was the issue of funding, which, you know, I'm sure you're all aware is quite often the continual challenge for all projects. But one of the strengths of this network was that it continued to operate over a number of years. But that had the effect then of making it subject to kind of the ebb and flow of international interest in the country, which made fundraising really difficult at times and further limited the ambition and scope of the network. So in terms of lessons learned from the project, well, firstly, that violence monitoring using trained community monitors can be really effective. The project produced an extensive database of more than 5 years of incidents across the whole of the country. And a large reason for this, for the success of this project, was that it was locally led and able to adapt to the local context. So the project evolved greatly over those 5 years as the situation changed, as the political context shifted nationally and more locally. The network was able to change how it worked to stay relevant and effective. However, despite the best efforts of the network, security, both digital and physical, was a major concern for the network and each of its members. I've mentioned already that this placed many constraints on how effectively the network could operate. And it was something that needed to be kind of central to the initial planning, but then also continually reviewed as the project and the environment in which it operated changed. The next lesson I want to pick up on is that the early warning can only provide an insight into violence, not the solution, and that reporting capability needed to be matched by a response capability internally. And this took a little bit of time to develop with the project. Furthermore, the project, one of the aims of the project was to influence international action. And despite the reports reaching the right people and being generally well received, there was often a frustration that this didn't translate into any action. This kind of leads on to the next point I want to make, which is that the early warning, it's important that early warning has a clear objective. From what responses are reports intended to generate, kind of what's the theory of change, and the design of the reporting system needs to be relevant for this. So what questions are being asked, how is the reporting being presented, who's it being presented to, that kind of thing. I also want to say that just a quick mention about technology. And I think sometimes, and there was a kind of a tendency within this project as well, to put too much emphasis on the technology, to use things because they kind of sounded exciting or cutting edge or looked nice. But what made this project work most effectively was the collaboration and the sharing among organizations and the credibility that the network developed over a number of years. And that sometimes the technology actually got in the way of that. And at its best, this project wasn't particularly high tech, and parts of it were run just on paper forms and SMS, but it worked and it was the right tool for the task at the time, and it didn't get in the way of the kind of the core function of the network, which was to respond to violence as it occurred. And then finally, I just want to emphasize that developing a system like this took a lot of time. In this case, it started off with a 6 or 9 month pilot before it was eventually scaled up, and it took another year or more to really refine the processes and develop the expertise. And even after that, the project was constantly evolving to adapt to a changing situation. But that time was crucial to the success of the project. The longer it ran for, the more effective it became, the more credibility it generated, and the better it became at kind of responding to the needs of the conflict. So that kind of brings us to the end of the presentation. Thanks a lot for listening and for your patience at the start. I realized we're at time now, but if if anyone does have any questions right now, I'd be happy to answer them, and we can stay on for 10 minutes longer. Or if not, my email address is on the screen. So, please reach out by email as well, and I'll be happy to answer questions there.